Welcome, everybody. Fortunately, our home inspector had to cancel last minute, but honestly, that might be a good thing today because what we're about to talk about is something your agent should have already told you, but they probably didn't. Today, Crystal and I are breaking down everything you need to know about home inspections from from the buyer side on what to expect, what to watch out for, and how to use the report to protect yourself and your money. So let's get into it. So Crystal, one talking point, that we should always start off with is that before the inspection, you always have to get your own independent inspector, and never one suggested by the seller or the home builder or whoever is on the opposite side, right?
Absolutely. Very, very critical to make sure that you are choosing your own professional. You definitely want to choose someone reputable and never want to go with a suggestion from the other side.
Absolutely. Another point that for every buyer is to be there in person, walk through with the inspector, ask questions, take notes. And I would also say just, you have that inspector's phone number on the report, and you can always go back to it for, if you're up late at night concerned about, I don't know, just a small pinhole leak or whatever the case may be that you see in the report, you have them to call at any point in time. So another point that is important is understand what's not covered under inspections. So it doesn't include permits, HOA violations, or sewer lines unless you actually add it into the inspection report. And I, in the past, actually had to do, a separate inspection for my client that was a septic tank. And that cost a pretty penny because, one, there's not a lot of septic tank inspectors out there.
Right.
It's a crappy job, no pun intended. It's just very specialized. There's not a whole lot out there. So you have to kind of, see that in the mind of the property of what to inspect on there. Crystal, is your listing have a pool? I don't remember.
The open escrow that I have right now does not. The last one that you and I worked obviously did. Again, when we're talking about inspections, I feel like it is unreal how many different types of inspections there are and different types of specialists for different things on a property. I'll have to go back and double check. Shiloh was just doing a training on an actual document that has all of the different types of inspections that you can request and conduct. And, they really vary, and there's a ton of them. So really, really good stuff to know.
Yeah, it's not the BIA, but it's BIE, Buyer's Inspection.
Correct. Yeah. So that's just a really great foundation piece, if you will, for all of the different types of things that you can investigate in a property. Inspections can be anything from something like ours, an agent visual inspection, where we're just visually looking at things and taking notes, whereas other things can be incredibly invasive. I've seen so many different types of testing and, just forms of inspection that have been interesting. So important that buyers know that they have every right to fully and thoroughly investigate every piece of that property that they're looking at buying.
Absolutely. Another talking point on there is going in the mindset that every home has issues when you read the report, and even new home builds have issues with them. And make sure, especially with new home builds, don't, use their inspector. Spend the money to use your inspector on there, because they're gonna just say everything's fine, so I don't know what the relationship is, and you never know. So having that on there is important. And also, inspections here in California, they don't include termite. And
no, it's a whole separate report, guys. So for anybody watching this, just be very aware that in a general home inspection, termite is completely separate, but very, very important here in Southern California. California in general, I think, but Southern California specifically.
Yeah. No, talking to termite inspectors, they say that every 3 to 5 years, termites do come back to your property. So also know that in mind, because if these termite companies try to sell you a yearly fumigate treatment system, that's kind of overkill, because it takes about 3 to 5 years before the infestation takes to come in. So a 2-year would probably succeed. So confirm with your termite guy. That's what I've been told. From a agent standpoint, talking about termites, we usually recommend doing the termite as a listing agent up front, because of a negotiation tool on there. Because once the buyer comes in and it requests that, they use their inspector, and then they can use the negotiation aspect to it. And most of the time it doesn't work out. And so
that's very important strategy wise. The fact that you said starting with the listing, that is really the strongest place to start, is with the sellers. I've definitely had experiences where people didn't think they had termites or didn't feel the necessity for it. So that's sometimes where you can get into, a buyer trying to negotiate it. But you're totally right. It's important to address upfront if you can or need to. And it definitely is a leverage piece.
Right.
Yeah, it's a big ticket item, like a lot of things. I think that when you're looking at the most costly pieces of property, you can be looking at things like the roof, plumbing. There's a handful of different things, right? You just as well know. So they're all important to really be mindful of. But starting with termite, absolutely key. You're totally right.
Right. And I would put that into the big four. So the big four is foundation, roof, electrical, and plumbing. And a lot of times it termites get under the roof and that space underneath, and every once in a while you gotta get it fixed up properly, and just kind of take care of that from a homeowner standpoint. But the big four is really important for buyers when they're having a home inspection to look for: foundation, roof, electrical, and plumbing.
Right.
And when you do get that general home inspection, it's a general home inspection. Going back to what Chris and I talked about with the BIE, you have as many home inspections as you want to pay for. You can. Are they necessary? Depends on the home. You don't need a pool inspection for a home that doesn't have a pool. Certain areas you don't need a geo inspection. You don't need, there's a long list of everything. So, if you want to spend, 100, 200, 300 for 20 different reports, you can, but it's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, yeah.
What's at the property? You definitely don't need a pool inspection if you don't have a pool, so it's per the property for sure. But yeah, you're very right. I was intrigued by that form, because it really empowers a buyer to know everything that could potentially be on the property, like even things that they wouldn't normally think about. So great to know, and a great tool to use,
Absolutely. And then your home inspection, you're going to have 50, 60, 70 pages. It's going to happen. Just prepare yourself for it. It's going to be there. and not everything is important. I remember one inspector that I use, he always puts in the guide rails for some of these doors that they don't have like a track underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And don't freak out. It's a dollar, little thing that you can get from Home Depot.
Right.
And so, is it a safety concern? Yes. Is it something that the seller should pay for? Not really.
Right.
It's not that important, but it's there for you to know, as buyer beware, that's what's going on.
And when it comes to a general home inspection, you'll have an array of different things on that report. The most important things to be focused on, right, are those big ticket items like those 4 that you mentioned. And of course, there's going to be things in there that are safety items, right, that are pretty critical. There are points of government points of sale, as they call them in the contract, that basically are items that have to be addressed prior to the transfer of title and prior to the sale. Things like smoke detector, CO2, the water strapping on the water heater. But all of those things are itemized in the inspection report. So you may get a 50, 60, 70 page report, but really what's most important to focus on within that is, the more costly items, the safety items, things of that nature. So
absolutely. And you hit it too, as far as the only 3 things required to sell a home, which is carbon monoxide detector, smoke detectors in the house, and water heater strapping. If it's a full regular tank. I know tankless is kind of getting out there as far as popularity, but you have to get it strapped right, and you have to have those 3 in order to sell the home. That's per California law. Right. Everything else that is in the home inspection is negotiable on there. So another thing when you're looking at a home inspection is to learn to separate cosmetic issues from structural and safety issues. The popcorn ceiling is nothing that is unsafe. Well, it is unsafe if it gets into the air.
It's only unsafe when you disturb it. And it's funny you bring it up because I had a buyer that actually contracted a company to come out and test the asbestos. So I had the joyous opportunity of meeting somebody who worked for one of these labs that came out, got on a ladder, scraped about an inch by an inch portion, bagged it, sent it to a lab. My seller at the time was a young new mom, a young couple. And so they knew that it was safe because it wasn't being, disturbed. The second that you move the popcorn ceiling and you start like scraping it and things like that, that's when it's in the air, like you said. And that's kind of the biggest concern. But just having it these days isn't really the end of the world. But that's one of the inspections I've actually had experience with. So unique, everybody's
Absolutely
got their particular things that they want to know and feel good about and confident in moving forward with. So, and it was awesome too, because to be honest, I kind of was of the understanding previously that it wasn't unsafe, and so was my seller. But I thought it was wonderful because the seller was actually willing to pay for the report. Normally, it's the buyer's due diligence; it's their responsibility. But the buyer was really concerned about it, and we wanted to be thoughtful and considerate of them too. And it wasn't outrageously expensive, so it worked out beautifully. But popcorn ceiling is a thing for some people,
Absolutely. All right. Okay. So, Crystal, what is deferred maintenance? What does it really mean, and why does it matter?
Oh gosh, deferred maintenance. Well, I would explain it as undone work, regular routine items that would be considered standard maintenance or standard upkeep that have been deferred or neglected. I've seen a lot of sellers just get older and they're incapable of doing certain things. But whatever the case is, deferred maintenance is kind of like the deterioration of a property, if you will. And gosh, we see them all the time everywhere. It's It's a very, I think with the baby boomers too right now, I'm seeing it a little bit more than I did in, I would say even 5 years ago. So deferred maintenance is something that people really need to be aware of, especially buyers. Obviously, it reflects the condition of the property and they need to be aware of what they're purchasing. Yeah, deferred maintenance. It can also be an opportunity though, depending on the buyer and their goals. Some people, I like to consider it or call it like a blank slate, the ability to do a little bit of work on a property and put into it what you want and make it your own is special. So different ways of looking at it, right? But
Absolutely.
important to be aware of and know about and address prior to purchasing a home. If there's deferred maintenance, you should know about it, and all of that will come out, within the inspection reports that you choose to purchase.
Yeah. And they'll give you an approximate timeline too of that deferred maintenance of how much longer whatever that part of the house is, whatever that appliance is, whatever that case is. They'll say, hey, you got 10 approximate years. They're not going to give you an exact point, but you should look into this, at that period of time and then research it.
Right.
And I think you're right. We're going to see a lot of deferred maintenance homes in the next few years. I think there's going to be a trend in there, and that's critical. So, as a buyer's agent, Crystal, how would you use the report strategically with the seller?
Oh gosh. Well, the first thing I always tell my buyers is to alleviate themselves of liability. So depending on what comes back in that inspection report, I always shoot for getting a credit from the sellers. When we send our request for repairs, after reviewing that inspection report and deciding what we would really like to focus on, what's most important to us, then I usually ask the sellers if we can get our own professionals out to get quotes for each of those items. When we have an approximation of what those will cost, we usually go back to the seller and say, hey, instead of us doing this work during escrow, and instead of you, doing this work during escrow, why don't we just ask for a credit on close? In which case the seller will provide you with a certain amount that is negotiated through that request for repairs in that inspection period. And then you kind of just plug along from there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just one of those things I feel like is very, very, very important. That first inspection period and due diligence is critical.
Yeah, and the most important thing for any buyers that are watching the replay is that you can renegotiate price, ask for repairs, request credits at closing, but it depends on the motivation of the seller. It also depends on if there's any backup offers, multiple offers that came in for you to win it. So you have to be very strategic about it, because if you're going to send them a whole to-do list of 50 different things to fix up before you move in, they're going to say, go away. So, and they can agree to some of it. They can say no. They can give you a closing credit. So you have to be really careful on negotiating, because, some people, this is, an emotionally tied change that they're going to do. Right. And they had home sellers blew birthday candles in their house. They had parties, they had memories in their house. And so you never want to personally offend them in there. Right. And I mean, logically, from a standpoint, yes. If you take out emotions, yes. I mean, it's understandable. Right. But we're in a business of people to people, and you have to do it very, very carefully on it. So.
Yep. Very true.
All right. Another thing on that is knowing your contingency window, because missing that deadline can cost you the deposit or cost you your dream home in there. And you have to find a way to structure it down pat. And with inspectors that I've used in the past, Um, it's a company that, you call them and you say, hey, I have this party. It's a single family, has no pool. It's a 1-story, a 2-story. These are the inspections that I'm looking for, and it's like a, on demand. They'll get a home inspector that day.
Right.
And then, while you're there, with the home inspector, they might say, hey, the electrical panel might need a secondary report. So you get on the horn with the electrical guy. Hey, let's get them in, and they can be busy.
Right.
They can be busy. So you have to kind of move fast through the inspection period.
Yeah,
And
so California, the contract has a built-in 17-day inspection period. But as a buyer, you have the ability when you place your offer to strengthen that timeline and shorten it, or to extend it, should you want to extend it and have, a longer, more ample time to do those inspections. But in the contract in California, it's a 17-day inspection period. That's the standard. So that's about how long you have to contract all of these different professionals that you want to come in to look at the property and do these reports and get them back to you. So you're making a very valid point in that if you place a strong offer, or, on the listing side, if you accept a strong offer, you can be moving very rapidly. And you are locked into a contract. This is a real contract. We're not just joking around here, and it's they're serious. So you've really got to abide by the timelines and make sure that everything is in order and very clear. I've had situations where people have had to push escrows out because they just couldn't get those professionals in time. It happens, but the goal is obviously not to let that happen. So,
and even if you do remove inspection contingency, you have the right to inspect the property.
correct.
It just takes away your ability to negotiate on repairs.
Correct. So if you waive that contingency, but you still conduct those inspections, it's a wonderful thing for the buyer to have the knowledge and all those material facts, but you can't necessarily use that within that time frame to then negotiate. So
Yeah. So be mindful of it, and you got to have a good realtor walking you through on what needs to happen next. And we're on day 3, we're on day 7, we're on day 14, whatever the case may be. You have to have that constant conversation with the realtor as far as how much time you have, and hopefully you get the right people in there on time. Because I remember, it was like roofing season. I remember I had a buyer and they needed a roof inspection for the loan to get a credit, and we could not find a roofer for they were not available for 2 to 3 weeks, and I had to go through 100 different roofers on Yelp and on the phone and all the time. And that was really, really difficult on there, but I was lucky enough that the seller was cooperative and they needed to close, and they understood that this has to get done anyway. Also, because the timing at the time, it was like in August, and you and I both know, Crystal, that August is kind of the relatively slower time of year for real estate transactions. There's not a lot of homes coming on the market, and there's also not a lot of new buyers coming on. It's kind of fading away. So yeah. All right. So, and when would you, Crystal, recommend your client to walk away versus to push through?
that's a good question. I think it's genuinely situational, but I can tell you that I've sold more homes telling people what not to buy than what to buy, because there is a point where you need to be very cognizant, and you just need to be mindful enough to look at the facts and stay less emotional and walk away. Again, these are huge investments, so they can become very emotional for some people. And it's really important to, even if this is going to be your primary residence or your forever home, you still need to look at a transaction with somewhat of a business mindset, if you will.
Yeah.
So, because it really is, it is business. It isn't just your roof. So
Yeah, it's important to, see the house with the client.
right.
I you know I understand why some agents hire out showing agents to show the property to their buyers, but I think that takes a lot more time, and I think seeing properties with the clients so you don't have to go through this mess of the inspection period. I think it takes away, because you can see, as much as Crystal and I have seen, homes, we kind of know like what's good and what to look for before an offer is placed in. Do we have an exact number of what the repair costs are? No, we're not we're not experts in construction and electrical and plumbing and foundation and roofing, but we have an idea of what kind of range to look for.
And we do
So
have relationships with basically any and every professional under the sun that you could need. So if it's something that a buyer wants to explore, if you have a great agent, they have relationships with those people and they can help, guide you. Because we can't
right.
really like, I'm not an electrician, I'm not a plumber, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lender. There's a lot of things that I am definitely not. And I just stay away from those conversations because it gets really tricky when you're not the professional, and I can't even tell you how many situations that I've had where the cost variance is huge, right? And so it's really important to do all of that homework and really price it out and then see what the clients want to do.
Yeah, and it's difficult from the buyer standpoint to say, I want to know, I want to know. Well, you got to hire the right experts in that specific area.
Right.
Um, so
Absolutely. It's very,
okay,
very important. Can't hire a surgeon to defend you in court or
no,
like you really got to find the right one. That's why like real estate agents too, like you just really need to have the right fit. It's not about necessarily personality or just work ethic or just this or just that. It's a plethora of things.
yeah, and going into in the home buying season, I mean that's why Crystal and I always recommend to also for clients to look into renovation loans on there, because they can take care of most of that stuff,
Yeah,
and you have to have that conversation with the lender to see where you're lined up at. Um,
absolutely.
so
The other thing I would recommend to anybody that's watching, that's looking at inspections, is to make sure that the professional that you hire, regardless if it's somebody that you have an outstanding relationship with or if it's someone that you met through your realtor, that you vet them. Look them up. Take the 30 seconds to jump on Google or the state contractors board website, whatever the case may be. Look them up and ensure that they are licensed and bonded and insured, so that this way you don't get yourself into a further pickle by having, poorly executed work done. There's going back to the liability and alleviating buyers of the liability by getting the credit from the sellers. What if you were to agree to let, the other side do work and they decided to hire their, I don't know, their neighbors, cousins, sisters, half brothers, uncles, best friend from second grade, right?
mhm,
And they have a great relationship, but that person isn't licensed and bonded and insured, then you've got a whole nother pickle because you've got bad work done to the property, you close escrow, and that's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. I've seen
right.
people patch things, I've seen people, I mean, it's been a wild experience to see some of the things that people do just to kind of get by to get through escrow. But it never works. And people will come back, buyers will come back on sellers and vice versa. It really just depends on the scenario again. But credit alleviates all of that because if you're saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I need 40 grand for brand new windows, they can give you the $40,000 on close, and then you can decide who you work with, the timeline, what you decide to put in, just not having the stress of a future lawsuit is nice.
Well, and here's an interesting point that people don't know. There is no license, certification, or requirement by the state of California to conduct a home inspection or be a home inspector?
Guys, if you didn't hear that, you might want to rewind for a quick second.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a big deal, because for everyone else who has to have license and insurance, you would think that an inspector would need to. So
And
again, that literally speaks to the point that I just made of like, no matter how good the relationship is, make sure that they're good at what they do and that you're, investing in work that you believe in.
yeah. So if a home inspector is offering to do it for $100,
there's a reason why.
There's a reason why. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you can look up, and even if they are, I've got a few people, inspectors specifically, that are a little bit older and a little bit more antiquated, but they're really good at their jobs. And I will say they're not very tech savvy, or they don't have a large online presence. There's still people that you can find who have, good reviews and great reputation and all these things. You need to find some form of something to ensure that you're safe, because these days people do crazy, crazy things. It's the wild, wild west out here.
Right. Yeah. And there is certifications, just FYI for everybody that's watching. That's like, oh, I have to dig through that. No, some of them are certified, and, a lot of times, they do have contractor's license or electric, some of them do have like a professional background in construction at some point. So, do your due diligence and read through it. I have my list of people, and, they're good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's nice to have good relationships in this industry too. I feel like if I'm in a situation with a buyer where we need to move quickly, by the grace of God, I have people that I can just call that I'm very confident in performing and being able to make it work. Those are such important relationships to me. I'm very, very grateful. And it's just so great for my clients,
Absolutely. So, Crystal, from the military relocation angle, VA loans have specific inspection and appraisal requirements buyers need to know. What can flag on a VA appraisal that wouldn't flag on a conventional inspection?
Ooh, hot diggity, lots of things. I feel like while FHA is pretty strict, they've got their guidelines. I think that VA is probably the most strict. They're also some of my favorite loans to work with. So important things for buyers to know. You guys have some really cool benefits, okay? And you probably are not aware of all of your benefits. Not only do you have the ability to put zero down, you have no down payment, but you can actually use your VA loan more than once. And when it comes to inspections, it's kind of an interesting play. So something that a VA loan or client would have is called non-allowable fees. So there are a certain list of things, along with the requirements that we'll talk about, that that need to be met, right? And there are certain fees that VA and veterans are not allowed to pay. So through the transaction, they obviously get paid through other means and other strategies, but that's something that everyone should know. When it comes to like military relocation, and I'm so sorry, I had like a little brain fog thing for a second. When it comes to their inspections, it's just absolutely key that you use the VA list of guidelines. That's what it was. So when you're going through an inspection, things that a VA loan will quickly call out are things like peeling paint, right? There's a quite a list of certain things that the property needs to qualify for. So as long as those things are met, you're in the green. But there's definitely a strict list, and I would quote more of it, but I would probably instead just like throw it in the chat in a minute or something to that effect. I want people to have every single detail. There's so much about VA loans that the government doesn't make average veterans and active duty easily able to find. It's just trickier information. And a lot of agents don't have relocation experience like I do. So it kind of is all across the board, but they are pretty strict loans, and with good reason. They are government backed. I am a firm believer that nobody in this country deserves home ownership as much as our elderly and our veterans,
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, as a listing agent, I love working with VA loans. As a buyer's agent, I love educating people on what they can do that they may not know that they can do. So it's a real win all around. But those requirements are strict. It's just one of those things. I'll have to pop a list into the chat. That way people can reference it.
Yeah, and I think a good listing agent, with all knowing that list of things that are required, should
Oh
show
yeah,
that to the home seller to say, hey,
absolutely.
this is the maximum that you're going to get on it. And you're not going to worry about inspection or the or the appraisal.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, well, and it really depends on, the offers that you're getting. So if we're talking from a buyer's standpoint, you're constructing the offer and placing it. But from a listing standpoint, I would absolutely, when I'm doing my avid and taking the listing, mention, should we get an offer from somebody with this? I mean, the property only qualifies for certain types of financing. So you shouldn't really
Mhm.
get an offer with financing outside of that. But should it happen, your seller should also be aware that their property condition doesn't meet certain loan guidelines. And that's a conversation that I have with all of my sellers, just because they need to know what to expect and have accurate expectations too. And if they have a rundown property with deferred maintenance, they're not going to get offers that are within an FHA and a VA realm because, the property doesn't qualify for it.
Yeah, and it's the different types of buyers that you're going to have. You're always going to have all cash, somehow, and then you have conventional FHA and VA. So if you're eliminating one, now you're down to 3 different types.
Correct. And it's
And
really
so,
tricky when you're shopping and you're looking only at houses that qualify for cash and conventional. But they're out there. A lot of investors are picking those up. But if you're just a standard buyer, you definitely want to be looking for properties that will qualify for a loan that enables you to put a little bit less down. With conventional, you have a little bit higher of a percentage with that down payment. It's what, 5% versus
mhm,
3.5% with FHA. So,
yeah,
yeah, so it definitely makes a difference. It's all about the property and then the loan product. And then just the education. It's astonishing to me how much people don't know. And frankly, the government doesn't just walk up to our military members and be like, "Hey, did you know that you can do this? And look at what we provide you with and how you can work it." Oh, it's unbelievable.
right.
I actually didn't know the full extent of real estate capability for veterans until probably 6 years ago. I was working on a disability rating for a veteran. And the more I learned about how they rate disability, the more I learned about just benefits in general. And wow, did that open a door for me, because it was shocking,
Mhm.
genuinely, world stopping how much they have to dig and dig and dig to find this information. And just not a lot of people have the experience, which is why I got my MRP. I am a military relocation professional because of that. I just found so much passion in it. I was like, wow, these people are the ones that deserve it the most, and nobody is guiding them. That's not cool. So, you know,
Absolutely.
important
Absolutely.
things to know.
MRP.
Yeah. That's another thing,
Okay.
assumable loans with veterans. They are some of the best assumable loans. A lot of people buyers don't necessarily always know that it's a capability. Not all loans are assumable. I'm not a lender. This is not lending advice. Not all loans are assumable, but for the few out there that are, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that feels as good as getting, a 2 or 3% rate in today's market for
Yep.
a veteran. And if you are strategic and you know how to approach it, yes, it is a longer escrow. Yes, not all of them can do it, but they are out there. And what a strategy if you're looking for a low monthly payment and you deserve it and just don't know that you're capable.
And also, if you think about it, the seller would probably get more money for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're definitely looking at a higher purchase price with a different loan package like that. And there's a certificate actually that has to be essentially left behind with the property and the loan. And so that next buyer gets it. So it's also like a relationship thing. I think that it's a very special thing when you have a VA assumable to a VA assumable. And again, this is not lending advice, but the facts are if you're a VA loan, you can't give your loan, it can't be assumed by someone who's not a VA. It has to remain the same loan product and it has to be taken on by somebody who is a VA buyer. For example, I had one where we almost assumed a loan, but it was not a husband and wife that were purchasing the property going on title together. They were fiancés. But unfortunately they couldn't assume the loan. Only the husband or the, military member could. So just important things to know and really good strategies for the people who deserve it out there,
Absolutely. They definitely deserve the
Yeah.
benefit. It's the best
It's
thing.
so crazy. Here's a little just random piece of info that probably nobody needs to know, but it's crazy to me how our military deserves the greatest service because of their service, right? And you actually can't market anything real estate on base, on any of the bases. It's not legal. So I, for a while, was thinking, oh, this is awesome because in my previous career, I had worked on several bases and, done externships and different things. And so I thought, well, how neat would it be to get on base and, do some sort of educational series or, anything. And it turns out you can't. So I ended up building a great relationship, and there is an event one day of every year where they get together and they allow people to come in and like set tents up and do a little marketing piece. But outside of that, it's mind boggling to me that the people who need this information so desperately don't have it. A lot of them live on base. And so they're just staying on that base and they're not exposed to much about real estate. And then you'll just run into somebody that, oh yeah, I'm a veteran and I've got my BHA and it's $6,000 a month, but I'm looking for a rental. It's just me. I have this crazy high, BHA, which is the basic housing allowance that the military provides for their monthly housing if they're not going to be on base. And so it's wild because you can use your BHA to purchase. And a lot of people don't know that they're able to do that, So yeah, it's a game changer. Just knowing and understanding really helps people.
They should really consider using that towards buying a multifamily.
You would think that more military members would do that out the gate. I haven't seen a ton of, I've seen a couple, but I haven't seen a ton. I think that the other thing is the lack of education also makes them a little bit hesitant with the property management topic. So having multiple units, being in California, laws don't tend to lean toward the landlord. And so I'm not sure, who is guiding each of these individuals and, those conversations. But what I've experienced in the few people that I've worked with that did multifamily, they were even still a little bit hesitant, and I still had to get them in touch with a property manager, a few people, so that they could then deem whether they wanted to hire, a third party to manage the other units, even if they were going to live as a primary, in one of them. It's all situational, everybody's got different goals. Some people have families, some people are single and young, and it's always the really young military members too that I'm just like, oh my goodness, I want this for you. You're so young. And if somebody would have educated me, or if I would have been inspired or something when I was younger, what a different life I would have, So very powerful to share with them. And I think that it's also a form of independence. A lot of military members, their independence and discipline levels are through the roof.
Yeah.
Homeownership is something to take pride in. I always tell them too, like, you never want a lack of control. And just something that's like a common theme with a lot of those people is control your controllables, right? And so I always like to remind them that there's no ROI in renting unless that's a specific situation for you. And somebody can always come in and pull the rug from under you and say, oops, need to move back into my own home, or oops, my brother became homeless, so we've got to sell and need to help him. Like, all these situations can happen. And when you've got a military member with means, to buy instead of rent, that's usually better guidance, just because that ROI matters. Equity is so important.
Absolutely.
That's why inspections matter, because you genuinely need to know the condition of what you're purchasing. It's like anything else,
And I think it's important, getting into probate, you're getting into a situation on probate. You're buying a house that probably has deferred maintenance 99.9% of the time.
Right.
So, are you getting a deal, or are you getting a money pit situation?
Right.
And so, understanding with probates properties a lot of times is that, the condition, the person was slowly, fading away physically, mentally, and things are just getting worse. And when that happens, then the maintenance of the property jumps down. So you have to get a home inspection, I would say, on a probate home that's for sale.
Right.
And
So Conrad, so with a home in probate, or in a probate scenario, if it's being sold as is, because the contract says as is, and maybe we'll just say for theoretical purposes that they're really adamant about that as is, how do you guide your buyers in that scenario?
yeah,
Because
so as
he's saying
a-
that we're not going to do
yeah,
anything, like
yeah,
how?
it's as is in the current condition. So you're not going to ask for a tree to be removed down. You're not going to ask for a new kitchen. You're going to as is in the current condition when you saw it. So when you see the photos, you see it's advertised that way, you're buying it in that condition. As far as negotiating, you don't know the situation with the plumbing, electrical, all that other stuff, because that's not presented to you.
Right.
I mean, if you see a light bulb out and you ask for it in the offer, I mean, you could, if there's an issue with the door to open it up that needs WD-40, or just, somebody to trim the door, or whatever the case. Because I actually ran into one of those fairly recently, and I wrote in the, offer, I said, seller to, repair door to be, operable. Because that's a, livable condition and
Right.
habitability. If your door is closed shut, and you have a client who's elderly, and they can't get out, there's a fire, that's an issue.
Absolutely.
So I wrote that in on a client. We were the only one in that scenario, so I wrote that into the offer. With the home inspections, that becomes another issue. Is it a multiple offer? Is it, what's the scenario?
And have you ever deterred someone based off of an inspection from moving forward in a purchase? I would imagine so, but like, tell me a story of an experience. Like,
I think my brother, I don't recall exactly. We were in escrow. They saw the inspection, and I mean, here's one question for everybody out there to ask your home inspector. You ask your inspector this question: would you or your friends and family live in this property, and you'd be comfortable them living in it right now?
yeah, that's a good question. Saying, is
So
this risky? Would you be willing to live here? Yeah, I like that.
So the inspector, he kind of dodged it a little bit, and I remember my brother's wife, she was a little bit concerned, and so then they pulled out, and then they found a house right afterward, and so it was a great situation. And I mean, there's issues too with the property, but it wasn't as bad as the one that they saw. I really don't recall exactly that time. when we were like, okay, this is time to kind of pull out of this deal.
Right.
So it also depends, when ideally how much financing they have. Like if they have $200,000 in savings and it's a new air conditioning unit, okay, get a new air conditioning unit. But the other advice that I always make sure to have for home buyers is this: make sure that you write in asking for the home warranty that covers you for a year for everything that is currently operable, because the house, when you move in, it's got to adjust to the new owners. They might be someone who doesn't the previous owner doesn't use the plumbing system as much, and then you come in with a family of 5 and you're using the plumbing a lot, and then things come up faster.
Absolutely. Yeah, home
So
warranty. That's when I think that at some point we're going to do a whole feature on like a whole episode of just home warranty, because they're so important. But I completely agree with you there. That is critical. And I've never, when you said it, I thought, what an interesting way of phrasing it, but ain't that the truth? The property actually has to get used to the new family.
yeah, it's got to adjust, whether it's somebody who's using more electricity, less electricity, all that. So that's what I would say. Just ask the home inspector, would you or your family and friends live in this house in the current condition?
Right. It's an excellent question. And I think that it would be great to get an answer from an inspector, because, they've got that knowledge and can answer honestly, and that might change your perspective. So
absolutely. So, okay, we'll get into some questions. I think we've been trading off some of these already. So what's the biggest mistake you've seen a buyer make during an inspection period?
You want the truth? Me telling them
closed sales.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, just giving people guidance and them thinking that it's not as critical as it is, and maybe not taking all of the guidance, taking portions of it, that can ultimately become really costly. If your agent advises you to do something and says this is why and why it's important, and you opt not to take that guidance, that is 100% your right. But it can become very, very, very costly. So
Yeah.
I can say that there's been times that I've recommended getting a certain type of professional out, and they chose not to. There was actually, I had my own personal situation with a lot line. And so that was a surveyor. Surveyors are exorbitantly expensive. It's not like they're just measuring one lot line. They typically need to do the whole lot. And it's down to the millimeter. It's so tiny and unbelievable. The detail is unreal. So just with that, that's just another experience. I think that if you have hired an agent to work for you and to work with you, you really have to have excellent trust and confidence in them and in what they're advising you to do. So that's super important. And also, I'm not even just saying from an agent perspective, but we could say this about anybody, whether it's your lender, whether it's, escrow or another third party. If they're guiding you on something and maybe you take 50 or 70% of the advice, that can certainly be detrimental. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, we asked some of these questions. So everybody that's
watching, let you wrap up. I think we just hit all of it.
Yeah, we did. So everybody out there, drop it in the chat. Are you currently in escrow or thinking about buying this year? And all your questions in here. So
well, this has been excellent. I really appreciate your time. I think that this was really, really valuable.
Let me get some of these questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
And
first
that's also
question. How much do they cost? So I'm assuming the home inspections.
yeah, so I'm not an inspector, but what I've seen is it's typically based on the property, on its bed bath square footage and then amenities, things like if it has a pool, if that inspector covers the pool. Most don't. Usually the pool is a separate inspection, like termite and other things, but I would say a couple of $100 just depending on the size of the property and how
Yeah.
much you're investigating.
Yeah, I would say $500 to $1,000, is that range. So plus or minus. So depending on the, if it's condo, one bed, two bath, whatever the case may be. Section 1 and 2 on termite. Okay, so section 1 is wood damage. So it'll be stated um, on the report. So it's actual wood repairs. Section 2 is that there's an infestation of termites. So that would be on the report. Okay. What if the seller hides asbestos? Most homes were actually made with asbestos. There's asbestos underneath. A lot of flooring. It's in popcorn ceilings. It's, made, a lot of houses were made with asbestos. So I would say they're not really hiding it. I mean, just be advised if your home is built before, I don't know, 1980, I would say that it probably has asbestos. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was going to say, also with the lead-based paint laws. So, anything 70s, 80s. And like you said, the seller's not trying to hide it. If you see it, you see it. And again, I can speak from experience. If it's not disturbed, it shouldn't be an issue. Again, I'm not like an asbestos expert, but that was what they shared with us. So, different for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Should I get a home inspection on a probate property? Yes.
2000%. Never
Absolutely.
waive that, especially on a probate. Ever, ever, ever.
Yeah. Okay. How do you handle a seller pushing back hard on inspection repairs?
There's different negotiation key points. I think that a strategy that I like to use is, let's say that my sellers want, we'll just go with windows as a repair. They want window replacement. They're old windows from, I don't know, 1955, and they want dual pane. So we're going to get more than one window person, professional, to come out to the property and give us a quote. Give us a quote for the material, the labor, everything fully encompassed. And then I'm going to go back to the sellers as a buyer's agent and say, well, I understand that you're not really keen on doing much, but this is actually a pretty big item, and here's what it's going to cost. So I understand that you're not interested at all, but this is really important to my buyer. Is there a way that we can meet in the middle? Is there a company that you might know of that could provide a quote? Then we can compare their numbers to our numbers and see if there's some way to kind of like work through this and move forward. There's no point in starting all over again and going back to market and all of these things if you can work it out. And sometimes you can, even when people say that they're not going to even address it. I think that it really comes down to what comes back in that inspection, what you're looking for, how important it is, what you need, how fundamental is it, like you were talking about. If it's a foundation issue, that's a big deal, so it could be a deterrent.
And you have to remind the seller that now that this is disclosed in the home inspection report, if I pull out, you have to show it to the next buyer.
Correct. So anything, you guys, that comes up in any of these reports, they become what are called material facts. So it is our job and our duty to disclose 10 times over every single material fact that we know. And that includes the seller. So if they get a report and it says that this is a flaw in their property, they are legally bound to sharing that with the next person. You can't withhold knowledge of a property with a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely unethical, and that's why these inspections and due diligence is so important.
Yeah, and make sure to send the report to the broker and the listing agent so they can't, you have that.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I've had experiences where buyers have purchased reports and then they didn't want to share them with the other side, but it's not very super common. So I think that sharing the report is actually super important, especially if you do intend to move forward and close, then you should have a copy of those things.
yeah, I think it's just good for them to have in hand. I know some listing agents say, "Don't send it to me. Don't send it to me. I don't,
Right.
So
It is what it is. Yeah.
send it to your broker. I'll
Right.
send it to your broker, sure.
Yep.
And that's material fact. What's something buyers almost never think to inspect that they should?
Ooh, I like this question. Conrad,
I'll
what's your
go.
answer?
I'll go first on a situation. So, being that I've when I first started, I worked with a lot of condos. A lot of condos and townhomes, they already have their own termite people.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing to understand is that the termites, are taken care of by the company, but you can do an interior termite inspection. And so a lot of these loans are going to ask for the interior inspection on the termite for condos and townhomes. Just because they say we take care of termite, you still should get an interior termite inspection because it's still important.
You win the question.
Oh,
Hands down, so that's a money answer because you're not wrong. And sometimes with like some of these attached properties, like you're talking about, they'll just, like you said, they have their own companies, or they'll just, hey, we've got clearance, here you go. It's covered by the HOA. So it's like, holy cow, and they're all different too. Again, like that's a really important thing too, is to see what the HOA covers, because you never know. That could also, open up a different inspection that you might not be liable for, but should be conducting, because not all HOAs are as good as they advertise to be. So,
oh yeah, you have to.
so if there's some maintenance that the HOA is responsible for, that's always something to think about.
Absolutely, and I'm not here to knock on HOAs. It's very popular to knock on them. There are some good HOAs out there. I know that one actually know the HOA president in Anaheim, and his area is so pristine, and it's just wonderful, and they run it like clockwork, and with parking and all that other stuff. He's got a walkie-talkie on the side of his on his belt, and very good community. So it's just there's a lot of good ones out there, and if you do buy a home with an HOA, just participate in the community so you don't have these people that are bored and have big egos making stupid rules.
Yeah, even ask your neighbors, before closing escrow. Chat with people that you see at the pool or outside walking their dog, and ask them hey, how do you feel about your neighborhood and your community? And then get involved. If you love the property, that is the greatest advice you could be giving people, Conrad, is to get on the board and to just contribute and to be present, because that's really the best way. Yeah, they can get really tricky. And ultimately, if you get into a situation where you purchase a property with a difficult HOA that doesn't uphold, what you're paying those fees to uphold, it can get kind of challenging.
Absolutely. Just be part of the community. You're part of the homeowners. Absolutely. It's called a homeowners association. So, okay. So closing out. So here's the bottom line. The inspection period is one of the most powerful tools a buyer has, and most people either panic through it or don't use it strategically at all. Crystal and I are here because we want you to walk into that process informed and confident. If you're buying in Huntington Beach, Los Angeles, or anywhere in Orange County, reach out to me. If you're in San Diego, Crystal's got you covered. All of our info is in the description below. If this was helpful, subscribe and hit that bell. We go live every week with real information for real buyers and sellers. And so we'll see you on the next one.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Conrad. I appreciate you. See you next week.
Absolutely. All right.
All right. Bye.
Take care.